just a few things about this kind of new environment that we're in. If you need some ideas about how to greet one another and how to pass the peace of Christ. This, of course, always works. Everything's okay. You can even do an air high five. I think I saw Kirk and Craig in an air high five, or a long distance hug. So, just a few ideas as we're getting used to some new things here. Our passage of Scripture this morning comes to us from the 10th chapter of Matthew, beginning with verse 24, and it's found on page 724 of the Pew Hymnal. But let us open with a word of prayer. Gracious and mighty God, we do praise and thank you for your word. We thank you for your written word given to us in our scriptures, that we may know your laws and your commandments and the way you would have us live our lives. And we praise and thank you, Lord, for the living word, for the word made flesh, your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, who came to open the scriptures to us and to show us through word and deed, through his life, death, and resurrection, what it truly means to live in the kingdom of God, loving God and neighbor. We ask your blessing upon us as we read and hear and speak your written word. Through it, may we be challenged and strengthened to hear and know and follow the living word through your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. That's God. Is it any wonder I'm not wearing a robe anymore between masks and glasses and microphones? All right. Worst comes to worst. Listen for the word of God from the 10th chapter of Matthew. A student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the student to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, how much more the members of his household? So do not be afraid of them. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in the ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of the Father. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You know, it occurred to me as I was beginning to prepare for this week that somehow I'm putting it on the lectionary, not on me, because this is what the lectionary said, but somehow this morning's passage on Father's Day is about division and family. It's about not loving your father, or your mother, or your son, or your daughter more than you love Jesus. So it's worth exploring a little bit. This is Father's Day, and I am so grateful to have had the best father in the world. I love my father so much. He is such a good, good dad. And Dwayne is also very grateful and blessed to have a fantastic father. So it might seem a little odd to talk about a verse that looks at the possibility of families being separated, but it is worth a look. Chapter 10 of the Gospel of Matthew starts out with Jesus calling his 12 disciples to him, giving them the authority that they needed, the resources and the power that they needed, and sending them out to proclaim the kingdom of God. So, by the time we get to verse 26, he has been telling them not about how easy it will be, but how hard it will be. They will be mocked. They will be refused entry. They will, verse 17 starts, be on your guard against men. They will hand you over to the local councils and flog you in their synagogues. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. And it goes on from there. So he's sending them on a mission that is not necessarily safe. And it's hard for us sometimes to think about that context, about a context where we are not allowed, one is not allowed to love God, at least publicly, more than he loves family, more than he loves king, emperor, governor. We're not used to that. And so it's hard to imagine, but this is what it was. And the persecution of the church, per se, we're not talking about that era yet. That is after Jesus' resurrection and the growth of the early church. But we are talking about a context where the emperor is seen as the Son of God. And so not only would agreeing that Jesus is the Son of God be blasphemous, but there is no loving anybody more than you love the emperor. And here were the disciples being sent out to preach the kingdom of God, and that whoever loves anybody more than they love God is not following the kingdom. Those were hard words to hear. Those were very hard words to hear. And so, what struck me as I read this passage is how many times Jesus repeats the phrase, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. He's just been telling them about people killing them, cutting them, throwing them into jail for the sake of the kingdom. And indeed, our passage today starts with a student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. Therefore, if the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, how much more the members of his household? Now, you recall just a few weeks ago, we talked about when Jesus was casting out demons, and the Jewish leaders, in an attempt to discredit him and basically accuse him of blasphemy, the Jewish leaders said, oh, Jesus is he's casting out demons by Beelzebub. It's not by God's power. It's not by his own power. It's by the power of Beelzebub that he casts out demons. And of course, then ensues the logical kind of quandary of why would you use your own power to destroy yourself in order to show your own power? But here, Jesus takes that one step further. Remember, he says, the Jewish leaders called me Beelzebub. So, if a teacher is above his student, if the student is not above the teacher, or a servant above the master, at the very most, they're equal. And if the Jewish leaders are calling me Beelzebub, what do you think is going to happen to you? When you go out into the world as my student, as my servant, if they have called me Beelzebub and the student is at the best equal to and probably worse than the teacher, what do you think the Jewish leaders are going to think of you if you follow me, if you take the resources that I have given you, the authority that I have given you, and you go cast out demons in my name, and you proclaim the kingdom of God, and you proclaim it as something drastically different than what your religious and political leaders have been telling you? That's what you have to look forward to. So, it's not surprising that perhaps the disciples were hearing him say over and over again, do not be afraid, do not be afraid, do not be afraid. And they were ready to fling that back at him as a question. Do not be afraid? Are you serious? Do not be afraid of being jailed, of being flogged, of being imprisoned, of being killed, of being separated from family, as we see later in the passage he talks about. What on earth do you mean by don't be afraid? And Jesus again reiterates God's immense, enormous, immeasurable love. Don't be afraid, because you're following the one who is in charge. I just finished, as you know, a certification program in Christian spiritual formation, and it was centered around a set of books by James Bryan Smith, who is a professor at Friends University. The Good and Beautiful God, The Good and Beautiful Community, or The Good and Beautiful Life, and The Good and Beautiful Community. And in The Good and Beautiful God, when we are looking at, the subtitle is Loving the God That Jesus Knows. And so as we take a look at the nature of God, and take a look at the nature of God's love for us, it's a wonderful phrase and a wonderful prayer that James Bryan Smith gives to his students, and he reads the book or takes his classes at Friends University. I am one in whom Christ dwells and delights. And I live in a strong and unshakable kingdom of God. You each, you are men and women in whom Christ dwells and delights and you live in the strong and unshakable kingdom of God. And the disciples whom Jesus sent out that day were people in whom Christ dwelled and delighted. And they lived in the strong and unshakable kingdom of God. And so in a way, they could go about the work that they were trained and sent to do and not worry. Don't worry about those who can throw you in jail, who can kill you, who can mock you, who can separate you from those that you love. Don't fear those who can hurt the body or even kill the body. Instead, fear the one who can send both body and soul into hell. Jesus isn't talking about God there. Jesus is talking about Satan. If you are one in whom Christ dwells and delights, and you are living in the strong and unshakable kingdom of God, Jesus' message, Jesus' kingdom message from the very beginning of Matthew is you either live in God's kingdom or you live in Satan's kingdom. You either live in God's kingdom or you live in Satan's kingdom. Living in God's kingdom sometimes ain't easy. It might get you killed. But don't fear those who can kill the body, but have no power over your soul. Or if you choose to walk outside the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, who you have to fear is the ruler of that kingdom. And it's even then, it sounds like a harsh message. And going on in the passage to where Jesus says, I have come not to bring peace, but a sword. And therefore, I have come to split mother-in-law and from mother-in-law from daughter-in-law, father from his son, mother from his daughter. That's pretty harsh. And then he ends with, whoever loves their family more than me, I will have nothing to do with them. And it sounds so harsh. And the first thought is, the first thing I'm going to do is go grab my son and my husband and say, you know what? You take one, you take all of them. Which, is kind of the point, but that we all follow Jesus together. But Jesus is not saying that you cannot love your children. You cannot love your parents. You cannot love your aunts, your uncles, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews. Jesus is saying, love me more. Love me more. Because from that love, from the love that we have for Jesus, born out of God's love for us, born out of the knowledge that we are those in whom Christ dwells and delights, and we live in the strong and unshakable kingdom of God. That's the source of our love for our family. Because our family are gifts from that God. So, if you didn't love Jesus more, you couldn't love your family fully. It's just about putting the first thing first. The horse before the cart, if you will. And I've always thought, ever since I first read that phrase in Jim Bryan's book and then, or Jim Smith's book, and then heard him say it aloud, and he ended our time together, our 18-month session. Each person received their certificate virtually, because it was due in May. And then Jim said, Laura, you are a daughter in whom Christ dwells and delights. You live in a strong and unshakable kingdom of God. And from the first time I heard that phrase, I had this visual of like each of us following Christ, going through life in the world in a kind of bubble. Maybe wrapped in bubble wrap, I don't know. A kind of bubble that not that we're oblivious to what happens around us, but that we need not hear it. Not even a sparrow, it's what's about a half a second, is out of God's care, is outside of God's sphere of love and providence and protection. Gosh darn it, if we aren't worth a little bit more happening. Maybe some of us just sit down, but we are worth more than a sparrow. So we live wrapped in this kingdom. We live wrapped in this care, in this love, in this grace, in this mercy. And I dare say it is almost impossible to be afraid in those circumstances. Again, that can be a little bit hard for us to understand. How many of you, not the love of God, that's not the part that's hard to understand, but to fathom the depth of it, and to fathom the prospect of not being afraid in the face of all of the opposition that we are open to by openly following God and teaching others to do the same. But we're not familiar with the depth of those consequences in the way that those first disciples were, in the way that many Christians across the world still are. Most of us have never been imprisoned for our faith. If you've been imprisoned for some other reason, I don't need to know now, but you can come to my office later for confession. Anybody sitting in this room clearly has never been killed for their faith, or you wouldn't be, But I'd wager everybody in this room has gone through life thus far without being tortured for their faith, without being separated from their family because of faith. And yet, even though there's a big gap in understanding and experience between us in this room and what's known as the persecuted church, in areas of the world where it is illegal, where it is punishable by death, where it, at the very least, will be violently thrown out of our home by the family to follow Christ. I married someone whose father and the wife and children that became his family were mocked. They were mocked by my father-in-law's own father and mother. And to some extent, aunts and uncles too. Mocked openly. crazy family dinners those must be. Happy Thanksgiving? Maybe. So, even when we can't understand the vast extent to which Jesus' disciples and the early church and the persecuted church today are putting their very being at risk, their very lives at risk in following Jesus, we know it can leave us offended. We know it can make for some terribly awkward Christmases and Thanksgivings. We know it can mean families who just don't see each other or want to see each other. And so, what I want you to take from this passage, what I want you to take from Jesus' kingdom message, first is, of course, you are one in whom Christ dwells and delights, and you live in the strong and unshakable kingdom of God. And second, since you live there, and since God's kingdom truly is strong and unshakable, you can trust in the one who values you more than sparrows. You can trust in the one who has given you the resources and the love and the strength and the character and the gifts and the authority that you need to go out and live in the kingdom of God and even to proclaim it. Now, I always think about this in terms of, so what would happen if someone put a gun to my head and said, do you believe in Jesus? And I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. Because, thank the Lord, it has never happened to me. I don't know what I would do. I am not saying that I am so fearless that I could face down a gun. I would hope I would be. I don't know. I do know this. I do know this. If the worst thing that someone does to me is mock me, shun me, hurt me, or even kill me, then shoot, at least I still end up with Jesus. Even if someone were to put a gun to my head and say, do you believe in God? And I said yes, and that person pulled the trigger, the worst thing that they accomplished, they'd probably be really disappointed if they realized this. The cruelest thing that they accomplished was to send me straight to Jesus. Wow. So that's the kind of trust that I want to challenge you to find in Jesus' promises to us. In Jesus' description of the trust and the love of God. It is strong and it is unshakable. And folks, in a world of violence and persecution and gangs and poverty and racism and pandemics, I want to be somewhere strong and unshakable. So my question is, will you join me? Let us pray. Gracious and merciful God, what an amazing thing to be able to realize that we live in a strong, unshakable kingdom that is the kingdom of heaven. Help us, Lord, to dwell there. Help us, Lord, to not be afraid. Help us, Lord, to understand that nothing will separate us from you. We are right in your control.